and got to mobilize volunteer residents as street marshals responsible for collecting information and keeping the neighborhood safe and informed, especially during the COVID times where there's a lot of fear and lack of knowledge of how to grapple with the pandemic. And it was wonderful for people to get out on the streets, to talk to street vendors, to talk to security guards, to talk to caretakers and residents of Kilimani. Really wonderful program. The organic market, that's famous Kilimani KPF, one of the KPF programs that's famous, will be back, reorganized, revamped, back at Kilimani Primary School, where you've always known it to happen. It'll be back in January. Another program under social cohesion that was very important was the Kilimani Mental Health Initiative. One thing that also COVID brought to the fore was the fact that the people were grappling in different ways with the amount of anxiety and stress that COVID brought upon them, whether be it health-wise. On the onset, we didn't know what COVID was. We thought everybody would be falling on the streets, and we didn't know whether we were ever going to see our friends again. And there was a lot of anxiety people were going through. The economic stress that was brought on by the pandemic, people losing their jobs, getting pay cuts. And out of this was birthed the Kilimani Mental Health Initiative. Please be on the lookout. There'll be wonderful programs coming in the next year, just seeing how we can, address mental health, mental well-being more actively. And this is all correlated with a lot of the other programs, be it Greening Kilimani, be it fitness, and all the other programs that we are involved in. But this just bringing this more to the fore in terms of being intentional about addressing mental well-being. We had, it was an interesting year, Kilimani-wise. We trended a lot, sometimes for good reasons, and sometimes for the wrong reasons. A couple of high-profile murders, and we were, that was sort of the narrative that was being, spun about Kilimani wasn't the one that we know as community. Out of this, we came up with the My Kilimani, campaign to highlight what we love about Kilimani and how we've managed to organize ourselves as a community. I don't think there's another community like ours that has been able to do so much. The sky is the limit, as it were. And just bringing that to the fore on the great things about Kilimani and why people choose Kilimani despite the problems we have, that it's still a wonderful place to live and work in. Daniel, you can scroll down. Kilimani Safety and Security, that's been, a core program. We continue to strengthen this through the COVID season, donated a lot of PPE equipment to the police, and just continue to be in touch with them. And it's led by Sadil Makil, the Security Working Group Coordinator, and they continue to remain vigilant. And you may have seen Sadiq sharing security updates on the group, and we're just very, very grateful to the entire working group in terms of as far as security is concerned and what they're able to do to proactively ensure that Kilimani is a safe place to live and work in. The Kilimani Police Project redevelopment project continues on track. It had stalled in 2020, of course, partly due to the pandemic, but partly also due to the loss of one of the persons who was spearheading the program. So 2021, they're looking at revamping this, and we will just ask you to continue keep tuned and let's see what we can do to have a better police station that hopefully also will lead to a better and safer Kilimani. Urban planning, very active, led by one Robin T. Emerson. We had 3 bi-monthly barazas, very well attended. Wonderful to have government on these barazas. We've had developers come on these barazas, and we really think this is just one wonderful way of modeling, what we're talking about tonight, of defining what our cities, and shifting the power from to the people as it should be in terms of what happens in our community. There've been wonderful conversations, and we're really looking forward to possibly having a local park development plan, what we call a local park development plan for Kilimani, that will help to define development parameters within the city and within within Kilimani. Just like us to recognize, Jan Mutai, engineer who passed on earlier this year in April. Just a wonderful Kilimanian, as it were. And we had a Kili Plan challenge in his honor around a public space project, greening and looking at greening Kilimani and having a little public space. We have Safaricom on board now to support that, and we'll be just looking forward to making this a reality in his honor, engineer Jan Mutai. May God rest his soul in peace. Kilimani Watch, also a program about just asking people, if you see something, do something, get in touch with us. We'll make it part of the baraza. Call your neighbors to come on and discuss this, and also equipping you, because Kilimani KPF's vision is really to equip members to take action themselves. We have a very lean secretariat, and really our strength is in our numbers. So there was a Kilimani Watch, just empowering residents themselves to, and giving them the tools to be able to take action themselves when they are questionable developments in their neighborhood. I hope I'm almost getting to the end. I feel like I've been talking to myself.
Oh, Emma, we're here, we're listening.
Yeah, greening Kilimani.
You can just give the highlights, which is okay. Yeah.
Thank you, and I'm sure I'm almost at the end. Wonderful project. We were able to come out last week, plant trees, and we look forward to planting more trees next year. You can scroll down. The recycling project also continues. I think Kilimani is one of the best taka solution stations, and we were able to recycle about five tons of waste. And so we ask all of you to always separate your garbage. There's Shell's petrol station along Agwin Skodek Road, just after Yaya, and before Kilimani Primary has a recycling station. Please take all your plastics there. Let's keep Kili clean. We, as part of the strategic plan planning, we hosted a Kili log where we were asking members to help define the Kilimani that we want. But in addition to that, we submitted integrated views on the public nuisance bill. We're able to participate in the county integrated development plan and let them know which areas, which roads need recarpeting within Kilimani, and we really hope they'll take our submissions very seriously. What we're famous for, advocacy against noise pollution. We continue to lead the community against noise pollution, and we ask all of you, I know this is a point for many Kilimanians, and maybe COVID has been a blessing in disguise, because people have to shut down by 9 p.m. and people have been able to sleep. But we continue to ensure that we take a more proactive role in this regard. And we ask all of you to reach out in case there's any challenge. We can give you the tools that you're able to use. We've continued to have a lot of advocacy work in this regard. I will not go through the social media highlights, but just ask you to continue to follow us on the different platforms and become a member. If you're on this and you're not a member, please become a member. We are a community organization. We need you to be part of shaping Kilimani, and we need you. So please become a member. Join us via members.kilimani.co.ke, and let's be part of the change. Let's shift the power and take charge of our Kilimani. Thank you so much for your support here, and those are various organizations that be part of it. So thank you, everybody, and just let us know which program touches you the most in the chat. Let us know. Just pick one program that you feel this one has really has helped me to sleep or this one has helped, in whatever regard, which program really is close to your heart? Please drop it in the chat. Thank you so much, everybody. And it's really honored to have been able to present that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. Thank you very much for that very, very good summary of activities in 2020. When you think about it, quite a lot has been done, despite the current season where everyone was locked down and people were not able to interact quite as much. But I think the foundation has really gone out of its way, and we really want to thank our volunteers who came out and supported our initiatives. And this would not have been possible without them. Our volunteers, our partners who have supported us from the ground, and all the activities that we have proceeded to conduct throughout the year. Thank you so much. So we will move on to the next session, which is a discussion with our very lovely guests. And before we do that, I want to introduce our host for this session. And he's none other than Mr. John Alanamu. John, I won't embarrass you too much, just a bit. So John Alanamu is a Kenyan investigative journalist, and many of you know him when he was with Muhammad Ali on Jicho Pevu at KTN Kenya. John, I don't know if that's where your claim to fame lies, but he's also the co-founder of Africa Uncensored, and he's a former features editor, reporter, and crimes investigator. John, I won't say much about you. So karibu sana. John Alanamu.
Thank you very much, Wanjiro, and thank you all for having me. I am a member of Kilimani project. I think I registered during the organic market, and I am a member by proxy because I don't live in Kilimani, but I work there. So our office as Africa Uncensored is founded in Kilimani. And so I'm very, very proud to be part of this community, even if it's just, during 9 to 5. But the discussion that we're going to have this evening, very, very interesting one, very pertinent, as Irungu had put it. And we have great guests. Hopefully, one of them will be able to join us later on in this discussion. She's joining us from very far away, and that's Alessandra Orofino. So Alessandra is the executive director of and co-founder of NOSAS, where she develops tools and methodologies for activism and participation. When reading her profile, it's very interesting how a lot of these very positive initiatives come from a point of pain. NOSAS was born out of Alessandra's experience with Meu Rio, a city-based community of hundreds of thousands of members that work together to impact local politics. And prior to founding that, she worked at Purpose, a partner organization of Meu Rio, where she set up the company's office in Brazil. So she's from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, a city slightly bigger in terms of population than us. It's a big city from a very, very well-developed country that unfortunately suffers the same kind of problems that we have with Kenya Power. And in fact, that's the reason that she's not with us at the moment. They haven't had power for 3 days, will you believe it? And it possibly won't have power until Monday next week. So we hope that Alessandra will be able to join us. But somewhere on the chat is, I don't know if, Irungu, you described her as a home girl. So that's kind of what she is. I'm going to keep with that description, right? So that's Sanda Ojiambo. The reason that I use that description is because she is a Kilimanian. And she lived there for quite a number of years until maybe about 2 years before she moved away to take up a job as the second female appointee as an executive director at United Nations Global Compact, right? And so what United Nations Global Compact does essentially is it's the Secretary General's strategic policy and advocacy initiative, which calls for the alignment of business operations and strategies with the 10 principles of in various areas like human rights, labor, environment, also lining them up with the sustainable development goals. It's a big job given how quickly the world is urbanizing and how common the problems that we face in Kilimani, in Nairobi, in various cities, towns, and villages across the country are across the world. And so Sanda is going to be a part of this discussion. Hopefully we'll be able to, there you are, Sanda. Just wave to everybody so that they know who you are. Well, I mean, it's kind of like a disguised blessing that we have Sanda on and Alessandra not on at the same time for obvious reasons, given the names. But before we get to you, Sanda, I just want to give people a flavor of what Alessandra does, and hopefully give a bit of time to join the call. If not, then we'll come to you. So just stay on the call. Daniel, you could play a bit of a video from Alessandra's TED Talk. Very, very interesting. And you will find, even in those first few minutes, so many commonalities with Nairobi. Daniel.
"54% of the world's population lives in our cities. In developing countries, 1/3 of that population is living in slums. 75% of global energy consumption occurs in our cities, and 80% of gas emissions that cause global warming come from our cities. So things that you and I might think about as global problems, like climate change, the energy crisis, or poverty, are really, in many ways, city problems. They will not be solved unless people who live in cities, like most of us, actually start doing a better job, because right now we are not doing a very good one. And that becomes very clear when we look into three aspects of city life. First, our citizens' willingness to engage with democratic institutions. Second, our city's ability to really include all of their residents. And lastly, our own ability to live fulfilling and happy lives. When it comes to engagement, the data is very clear. Voter turnout around the world peaked in the late 80s and has been declining at a pace that we have never seen before. And if those numbers are bad at the national level, at the level of our cities, they are just dismal. In the last 2 years, two of the world's most consolidated, oldest democracies, the US and France, held nationwide municipal elections. In France, voter turnout hit a record low. Almost 40% of voters decided not to show up. In the US, the numbers were even scarier. In some American cities, voter turnout was close to 5%. I'll let that sink in for a second. We're talking about democratic cities in which 95% of people decided that it was not important to elect their leaders. The city of LA, a city of 4 million people, elected its mayor with just a bit over 200,000 votes. That was the lowest turnout the city had seen in 100 years. Right here in my city of Rio, in spite of mandatory voting, almost 30% of the voting population chose to either annul their votes or stay home and pay a fine in the last mayoral elections. When it comes to inclusiveness, our cities are not the best cases of success either. And again, you don't need to look very far in order to find proof of that. The city of Rio is incredibly unequal. This is Leblon. Leblon is the city's richest neighborhood. And this is Complexo do Alemão. This is where over 70,000 of the city's poorest residents live. Leblon has an HDI, a Human Development Index, of 0.967. That is higher than Norway, Switzerland, or Sweden. Complexo do Alemão has an HDI of 0.711. It sits somewhere in between the HDI of Algeria and Gabon. So Rio, like so many cities across the global south, is a place where you can go from Northern Europe to Sub-Saharan Africa in the space of 30 minutes. If you drive, that is. If you take public transit, it's about 2 hours. And lastly, perhaps most importantly, cities with the incredible wealth of relations that they enable could be the ideal places for human happiness to flourish. We like being around people. We are social animals. Instead, countries where urbanization has already peaked seem to be the very countries in which cities have stopped making us happy. The United States population has suffered from a general decrease in happiness for the past 3 decades. And the main reason is this. The American way of building cities has caused good quality public spaces to virtually disappear in many, many American cities. And as a result, they have seen a decline of relations, of the things that make us happy. Many studies show an increase in solitude and a decrease in solidarity, honesty, and social and civic participation. So, how do we start building cities that make us care? Cities that value their most important assets, the incredible diversity of the people who live in them. Cities that make us happy. Well, I believe that if we want to change what our cities look like, then we really have to change the decision-making processes that have given us the results that we have right now. We need a participation revolution, and we need it fast. The idea of voting as our only exercise in citizenship does not make sense anymore. People are tired of only being treated as empowered individuals every few years, when it's time to delegate that power to someone else. If the protests that swept Brazil in June 2013 have taught us anything, is that every time we try to exercise our power outside of an electoral context, we are beaten up, humiliated, or arrested. And this needs to change. Because when it does, not only will people re-engage with the structures of representation, but also complement these structures with direct, effective, and collective decision-making. Decision-making of the kind that attacks inequality by its very inclusive nature. Decision-making of the kind that can change our cities into better places for us to live. But there is a catch, obviously. Enabling widespread participation and redistributing power can be a logistical nightmare. And there's where technology can play an incredibly helpful role by making it easier for people to organize, communicate, and make decisions without having to be in the same room at the same time. Unfortunately for us, when it comes to fostering democratic processes, our city governments have not used technology to its full potential. So far, most city governments have been effective at using tech to turn citizens into human sensors who serve authorities with data on the city, potholes, fallen trees, or broken lamps. They have also, to a lesser extent, invited people to participate on improving the outcome of decisions that were already made for them. Just like my mom when I was 8, and she told me that I had a choice. I had to be in bed by 8 p.m., but I could choose my pink pajamas or my blue pajamas. That's not participation. And in fact, governments have not been very good at using technology to enable participation on what matters. The way we allocate our budget, the way we occupy our land, and the way we manage our natural resources. Those are the kinds of decisions that can actually impact global problems that manifest themselves in our cities. The good news is, and I do have good news to share with you, we don't need to wait for governments to do this. I have reason to believe that it's possible for citizens to build their own structures of participation. 3 years ago, I co-founded an organization called Meu Rio. And we make it easier for people in the city of Rio to organize around causes and places that they care about in their own city and have an impact on those causes and places every day. In these past 3 years, Meu Rio grew to a network of 160,000 citizens of Rio. About 40% of those members are young people, age 20 to 29. That is 1 in every 15 young people of that age in Rio today. Amongst our members is this adorable little girl, Bia, to your right. And Bia was just 11 years old when she started a campaign using one of our tools to save her model public school from demolition. Her school actually ranks amongst the best public schools in the country. And it was going to be demolished by the Rio de Janeiro state government to build, I kid you not, a parking lot for the World Cup right before the event happened. Bia started a campaign, and we even watched her school 24/7 through webcam monitoring. And many months afterwards, the government changed their minds. Bia's school stayed in place. There is also Jovita. She's an amazing woman whose daughter went missing about 10 years ago. And since then, she has been looking for her daughter. In that process, she found out that first, she was not alone. In the last year alone, 2013, 6,000 people disappeared in the state of Rio. But she also found out that in spite of that, Rio had no centralized intelligence system for solving missing persons cases. In other Brazilian cities, those systems have helped solve up to 80% of missing persons cases. She started a campaign, and after the Secretary of Security got 16,000 emails from people asking him to do this, he responded and started to build a police unit specializing in those cases. It was open to the public at the end of last month, and Jovita was there giving interviews and being very fancy. And then there is Leandro. Leandro is an amazing guy in a slum in Rio, and he created a recycling project in the slum. At the end of last year, December 16, he receives an eviction order by the Rio de Janeiro state government, giving him 2 weeks to leave the space that he had been using for 2 years. The plan was to hand it over to a developer who planned to turn it into a construction site. Leandro started a campaign using one of our tools, the pressure cooker, the same one that Bia and Jovita used, and the state government changed their minds before Christmas Eve. These stories make me happy, but not just because they have happy endings. They make me happy because they are happy beginnings. The teacher and parent community at Bia's school is looking for other ways they could improve that space even further. Leandro has ambitious plans to take his model to other low-income communities in Rio, and Jovita is volunteering at the police unit that she helped create. Bia, Jovita, and Leandro are living examples of something that citizens and city governments around the world need to know. We are ready. As citizens, we are ready to decide on our common destinies because we know that the way we distribute power says a lot about how we actually value everyone. And because we know that enabling and participating in local politics is a sign that we truly care about our relations to one another. And we are ready to do this in cities around the world right now. With the Our Cities network, the Meu Rio team hopes to share what we have learned with other people who want to create similar initiatives in their own cities. We have already started doing it in São Paulo with incredible results and want to take it to cities around the world through a network of citizen-centric, citizen-led organizations that can inspire us, challenge us, and remind us to demand real participation in our city lives. It is up to us to decide whether we want schools or parking lots, community-driven recycling projects or construction sites, loneliness or solidarity, cars or buses, and it is our responsibility to do that now for ourselves, for our families, for the people who make our lives worth living, and for the incredible creativity, beauty, and wonder that make our cities, in spite of all of their problems, the greatest invention of our time. Obrigada, thank you.
Incredibly interesting TED Talk. I watched it a couple of days ago, and I've watched it again. And what was just, what occurred to me just now as I was watching it is how incredible the parallels are between the problems, the challenges that Rio has, and the challenges that that Nairobi has. And I was even writing them down. So, like with Bia, the child whose school was going to be demolished for a parking lot. You remember maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, the very horrifying scenes we saw at Langata Primary, and the campaign that was spawned out of that, the Shule Yangu campaign to protect over 15,000 schools across the country, which coincidentally was introduced to me by Irungu in 2016. Even if there are challenges, there are ways to be able to get around them. The second one was with Javita and the mother of, who's a mother of missing persons. And I thought that was particularly poignant, given that we don't have a centralized system of being able to track missing children, missing persons in this country, apart from asking the police. And there are people who go missing in our cities all the time, with Alejandro and the evictees, from who are currently in court and in other places, trying to talk about their problems, as a result of the construction of the Nairobi Expressway. I mean, even in art, right? One of the most seminal movies to come out of Brazil, City of God, and Nairobi Half-Life. If you watch them side by side, it would be incredible just how many parallels there are between Rio and Nairobi in terms of the challenges of urbanization and city life. And now we have, upon us an incredibly important moment in our history, as Irungu signposted at the beginning of this talk. The Nairobi Metropolitan Services versus what's in the Constitution, the impeachment of Governor Sonko, as well as challenges with participation of Nairobi citizens. But let's switch gears for a moment and bring in a person from far away, but whose heart is at home, I'm fairly certain. Sanda Ojiambo, as I mentioned, she's only the second executive director of UN Global Compact, who's female. And that's an incredible achievement and incredible kudos to you having taken up your assignment. But I think what I'm going to focus on in terms of asking you a couple of questions, Sanda, is the role of business, corporates, who are also residents and citizens in their own right, but occupy a specific space, even in the way we visualize them in our cities, right? So how, and Alessandra talked about this in her TED talk. How, from your point of view, do we get corporates to become participants, in building our cities, or building our cities in the image that all of us can live with and appreciate. Sandra.
Great, thanks, John Allen, and thank you to all of you for being here, and Irungu for inviting me. It's really great to be here. I just sent Irungu a picture of what I see from outside my window, which is actually nothing because it's so foggy and gray. And this is one of those days when I really miss home, sitting here in New York, but great to be here. So you ask a really important question about businesses and how they can become, I guess, more integrated into cities and places where we are. The truth is cities are a couple of things. They are homes to many, as we saw in the TED Talk, but they're actually also places where trade and marketing thrives. I think the challenge is in many places, businesses have simply come in to address that part, that they're there for trade and for building markets with very little regard for the other part of it, that most of the time they're setting up in places that is home to many, many people. So, some of these questions start from, simple processes, like what is the licensing process? When a business sets up in a place, are they licensed to be an integral part of that community, or are they licensed actually to take away from the community? How can communities participate in vetting, understanding, shaping that, the view of their community? What sort of businesses do you want to have? Do you not want to have? And I think because of such a lack of the opportunity for really structured urban planning and, community engagement and decision-making, a lot of times actually it's the community and the home life and the other part of the city that just gets totally ignored, and we focus simply on trade, market, and development. And there really has to be a strong balance between the two going forward. I think if anything, this last 8 months has shown us how symbiotic things are. Business cannot survive if the society around it is failing. I'm sitting here in New York at a time when actually I think just this morning, the governor's announced that indoor dining is closing and restaurants are up in arms because it's the kind of city where, people eat out, restaurants, businesses thrive on human traffic. There's a great symbiotic existence between businesses and community. In fact, many times I was house hunting. I just moved here 3 months ago. So an integral part of my house hunt was, what sort of place are you looking for? What sort of business vibe? Are you looking for something with a commercial, urban, lots of shops, lots of restaurants, lots of entertainment? Those, funnily enough, over here are the things that define a neighborhood. Whereas, back home would be more access to schools, is there greenery, etc. But there's perfect examples of how the two can actually live in harmony. But oftentimes, when it doesn't work well, the two are separate. And I think for me, that's like one of the key distinguishers.
Okay, imagine or reimagine for us at Nairobi where all of these things kind of work in harmony. So like you mentioned, for people like myself and people who, who have children, they'd be looking for a place that has good schools, that has places that the children can play, common areas. For single people like Javan, who's on the call, it might be something else, something, more to do with entertainment, being able to meet up with their friends. But imagine or reimagine what Nairobi could look like if we all participated and tried to recreate this image.
Well, first, I think you'll have to start from addressing actually some of the fundamentals about our human development indicators. For me, that would be first. I wouldn't even get into what does Nairobi look like. Again, I don't think anything can thrive with the type of indicators that we have right now. We have large numbers of people living in poverty. We have large numbers of people without access to healthcare and education. And I think we first have to put our energies at uplifting those indicators before we get into what does an ideal city look like. Because it doesn't matter how ideal your city is. If people are living in poverty or not able to access the basics, they will always gravitate towards that city as a source of income, even if it's only 100 bob, 200 bob a day, which will never actually fundamentally move them out of where they need to be. But they'll be under the semblance of, yes, we are earning every day because we can come home and put the small ugali on the table and the mboga and survive. But I think we just need to first address social safety nets and what they mean for the vast number of people who are always attracted to urban areas as a means of survival. So for me, that's the first, even before we get into planning what a city looks like. Yeah? Let's look at the social safety nets for what we need to provide, access to basic services, let them be accessible, let them be affordable, etc. as a first. If we were able to address that as a basic for me, then the next would be, how do you actually strategically plan what an ideal city looks like? So, in theory, we have an industrial area, but the truth is we know that around industrial area, I don't know how many mukurus there are, for example, surrounding that. That's not the ideal, but, have a proper industrial area so that issues such as heavy pollution, et cetera, can sort of be dealt with, in one part. And then look at what the role of light industry and the more retail sector is in terms of integrating that into community. But it requires planning. I think often, and what has happened in cities like ours and many others, is development just happens. And oftentimes, I know there's been great attempts at sort of stepping back and trying to plan forward again, which isn't always successful. And that's why I think organizations such as the Kilimani Foundation are very needed to be able to keep those checks and balances. But in the ideal, one would plan a lot better.
I want to ask one more question before I open it up for 3 questions to you, Sanda, and then now we'll open it up for a much wider discussion. I hope you can stay on. And you mentioned Mukuru, living alongside or existing alongside industrial area. You can mention all sorts of informal settlements across Nairobi, existing alongside other communities that perhaps require the labor force or require those communities to exist, but the living standards there are deplorable. But the theme of tonight's dinner and tonight's discussion is really, your freedom to define your city. And I want you to attack this question from a point of view of share of voice, right? In as much as there are, the Kilimani Project Foundations who've done a great job in terms of trying to coalesce the communities in a specific area, in a specific zone, to speak about various issues, to build communities around the things that people care about, those kind of universal things that we're all concerned with. How then do you bring in people from informal settlements? And do you think, as a person who's trying to integrate businesses and the corporate world with SDGs and being able to make our cities perhaps, project a better reflection of what we want, do you think that corporates, because of the position that they play in society, have a larger share of voice, and how do we change that?
Yeah, one of the things about, because you referenced the sustainable development goals, and one of the things about the goals and their call to business is for business to really take an integrated and more strategic look at how they approach development issues. So really to step away from philanthropy, and I know that there's always a time and space for philanthropy. I think Kenyans have always done a great job. They always rise to the occasion. There's a fire here, a flood, there's a famine, corporates are always at the edge. In fact, it's what I did for 10, 12 years of my life at Safaricom, But the other part of the work that we also did was for a business to really reflect on what is their role in society and how can they use their business edge and their products, their services, their technology, their peoples to help transform society from a positive way, because it's the best and the most sustainable long-term way to actually exist or coexist in society. So I think business has a key role to play. We need to strike a better balance between doing philanthropic response stuff to more strategic response stuff that will lead business to asking those fundamental questions like, what is our role in this society where we are situated, or this city, or this country, this economy to which we're contributing? I think that's a fundamental. I think you asked about business and the informal sector. Am I right? I'm not sure I got the full element of the question. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it was a rookie mistake by a journalist who's been in the business for a long time. You're not supposed to ask more than one question at a time. So I was asking about share of voice, right? So we have the Mukurus existing alongside the industrial area, and yet you'll have perhaps the people within, these more formalized parts of our city expressing themselves more directly, in a more unified way, and a vast majority of people not being able to get that unity of voice percolate to the point where things start to change for them. And I was wondering how you think that this could change, or if it's a problem at all.
Oh, it's a massive problem. I don't know that business can solve it. I just go back to leadership. All the people that you speak of in Mukuru who don't have voice, I'm sure at some point bet on having a voice by going to vote for a leader who they thought would be able to articulate that voice. And the question is, does that leader articulate that voice? And answer is probably not, if they're still in the same situation that they've been over the past number of years. So I think it calls for a lot of things. It calls for a lot of empowerment. It calls for there's some big systemic changes I think that are needed around the electoral process, around politics, around voting, around what happens around elections, and I call it the poverty of the election process, and how we can change those dynamics. I think they're massive. I wouldn't even pretend to know what the answer is like, but I know that there's a lot of people, millions of people who are stuck in a cycle where, every so often, and I think even Alessandra alluded to this in her video, that you're only empowered at one point every, 3, 4, or 5 years during an electoral cycle. But after that, all your dreams come shattering down. And hopefully over time, we'll have a different generation of leaders who will really actually take to heart that they're there to help empower and develop communities, and not just use those members of community every 3, 4, 5 years, whatever the cycle is in which country you are, to further their own gains. It's a very deep systemic question.
It is indeed, Sanda, and I hope you can stay with us throughout the rest of this call, because what I'd like for everybody who's on the call to do is start thinking about questions. I'm dividing this portion of our time together, this portion of the discussion, into two. Well, we'll ask Sanda 5 questions. If we can put them in the chat, and I'll pick all 5. And then ask them to you directly, Sanda. And then I have 5 questions for all of you to start thinking about. And Daniel, as well as Wanjiro, can start to think about who's going to be answering those questions. Because in as much as we're here to listen and to reflect, we're also here to engage about some of the things that we think can happen for us, right? So if you have any questions for Sanda, just start putting them in the chat box now. I'll be checking in a moment, but first of all, I just want to shout out someone who's on the call right now, Margaret Kazambi, who's listening to us as you would a podcast on the way home, I believe. Thank you very much for listening in, and that's really great of you for doing so. Margaret, just put on your mic and say hello.
Yes, thank you. I'm listening to you. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot, Margaret. And let's see if there's anything in the chat right now. If there's nothing in the chat, you can just switch on your camera and your microphone and ask, although that we'd have to give the person who speaks first an opportunity to finish their question. But I'd prefer that we put them in the chat so that we can have it in a bit of an orderly fashion. Okay, none in the chat so far. Is there anyone who'd like to ask their questions to Sanda directly? All right, Mugo, I see your camera on. You can switch on your mic and ask.
Okay, then let me ask a question. Sandra, thank you very, very much for coming on. But my question is often the difficulty of democracy seen as a solution towards wealth distribution and economic development. I think once we adopt an overarching capitalism as our overarching ideology, then discrepancies will always be there in wealth distribution. So the issue isn't a question of rich versus poor. It's really a question of abject poverty. And how do we get people out of abject poverty? And I don't think democracy, voting, is necessarily the answer. It is not by its definition intended to address wealth distribution or economic development, but it's rather a mode of just expression and giving a voice to citizens. So what really is a solution in a capitalist society that will move us from having the Mukuru and Jengas next to industrial area and Muthaiga versus Mathare and Kangemi versus, you name them, all the different slums, under our current ideology of capitalism? What is the solution? That's my question.
That's a great question. Let me attempt to give it a stab. I think, and I agree with you. I mean, it's, wealth is not distributed through the political system, right? But the political system, one, allows, I think, ultimately, yes, for the exercise of voice. And secondly, ideally for, the creation of or the shaping of the right types of policies that will enable some of that equitable distribution of resources that we seek. And at some point in time, because I believe, I say this with reference to some of the most basic things, such as basic social safety net systems, which I believe are within the domain of the public sector. But I believe that, as you say, wealth is created and generated, and certainly the multiply effect that we need to see happens within the realm of capitalism. And I think that's important. But the two need to coexist side to side. I think you need to have enabling policy to allow a bit more of an equitable distribution. Otherwise, you could also swing to the whole other end where you have capitalism that in and of itself generates massive inequities. And I think we've seen great examples of that. Places where there are really great bustling economic systems, but it's not necessarily wealth that trickles down to have any massive effect on the poorest of the poor. So I think we need to have a great balance of the two. I think you need great policies that are able to address the basic needs and ensure that there's a safety net. And then you need a capitalist or a business sector that will provide those employment opportunities, will provide income opportunities, and then will generate wealth that can then trickle down effectively. So I think you need the two. And I agree with you, it's not the vote that will create wealth or distribute wealth, but it's the people that you vote that hopefully will support policy making to allow for equity and equitable distribution of wealth later.
Great question, Mugo. And I see Janvan asking a similar question in the chat. I'll just read it out, and because I think in part you've answered. He asks, looking at Nairobi and Kenya at large, in the current market-driven setting, how do we ensure sustainable consumption and production contribute substantially to poverty alleviation? So there's glimmers of Mugo's question, but if there's anything additionally you'd like to add, Sandra, we'd be happy to hear it.
Yeah, I'd go back. I think you need the two. I still think that without a strong social safety net system that is driven by the public sector, we'll always still have those levels of inequity between the two parts of society. And the two really do need to go hand in hand for me and strike a really good balance between them.
All right, Sandra, last call for questions for Sandra. We're coming up to 15 minutes to the hour. I see a hand up. You can just unmic and ask your question.
I'm using the Kilimani. Sorry. Irungu, you wanted to go first? You could go first.
No, go first. I can follow you. Okay.
I'll make this quick. First of all, thank you so much, Sandra, for being here. I like your ideas about trickle-down economics, which I don't agree with completely. I do not think capitalism is a system for distribution. I think capitalism is just a system for production. It doesn't prescribe any distributive mechanism. It's only policies and a bit of leftist leaning thinking that sort of distributes incomes. But my question is, I'm looking at the roots of inclusion and participation, and I feel like the roots of that come from ownership, the right to the city, the right to public spaces. And I feel like we don't have the right to the city as citizens in this country. So what do you think we can do as communities to increase the rights to the city? Because, you know, December is coming, I mean, December is here, 25th is coming, and this place will be a ghost town. People will just leave, right? They wouldn't celebrate a very important, you know, one of the most important dates in the year where they live. They feel like they have to go somewhere. Or even national holidays like Jamhuri Day today, like it isn't being celebrated in the city. I mean, I've been out there in Kilimani, you know, it's almost like a ghost city. People feel like they have to go somewhere else to be Kenyans and not be Kenyans within the city. So what do you think we need to do to increase, you know, ownership that then I believe would increase participation?
Thanks, great question. And I truly appreciate your first comment. Let me tell you what is actually going through my mind. I was like, gosh, so are people now allowed to travel? Like, you know, the guys just moving freely between counties. Those are my first thoughts when I heard the question. But it's true. I guess, you know, everyone wants to go to shags or go somewhere. Why don't we stay where we are? I think the question is, what does a city represent?
True.
And it's always a good question. You know, I always ask, it's a good one to ask parents or grandparents, you know, why did you leave home, the village, to come to Nairobi? What did that represent? And what made you stay here? And why do you stay here over the long term? Isn't it almost ironic that, you know, for most, the cycle is you leave your home area, come to the city, I think ostensibly for work or education, but then retire back to a home area, which, you know, I don't know how much that home area would have changed or developed in the 30, 40, 50 years that you've been away. So I think the question to ask is, what is it that attracts one to the city in the first instance? And, you know, my rough estimation here, based on what I've heard from parents and other older people, is, you know, it's education, it's job prospects, etc. I don't think there's people who would move to a city, or at least our city, for the entertainment, social, etc. part of it, which is probably why people leave when the weekend comes, because actually the purpose of the city is probably not to provide that thing that they seek on the weekend. I don't know, I can't speak for many, but my first reflection is to go back to, you know, many of us don't have the choice. We were born in Nairobi, we found ourselves there. So, you know, on the weekend, you go out either to look for greenery, because maybe you live in an apartment building, you go out to look for quiet, you go out to look for, you know, whatever it is, you know, some fresh air. I think the great question to ask would be for those who, even in this current age, would still move to the city, but go back out of the city on the weekends and other things. What is it that they seek to find when they leave? And it would be a great actual piece to research and understand. I think a trend that I've seen a lot lately is, you know, people seeking to build, you know, weekend homes in Nanyuki, in Naivasha, and etc. And it would be great to ask them why, you know, why would they not make that investment in Nairobi? I'm sure that, okay, obviously there's space limitations, but, you know, it's an increasing thing. People just seeking to set up home outside of the city now.
They don't have ownership.
Yes, they don't have ownership.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Great questions there, and very, very interesting debate. I liked the comments about trickle-down economics and the vagaries of capitalism. I think that's a debate that we should have another Zoom call for.
I would take you on that. I would take you on that, John.
Debate on economic theory, I tell you.
Oh, for sure. Now, Robin asks a question. Do we have specific examples of public social nets, and how can corporates be better allies for residents accessing these rights?
Okay, so let me just speak from the corporate piece. I think that, you know, any well-meaning corporate actually also has to look at its own safety net that it provides for its own workers, you know. And I'll just start there before I get into what the bigger issue is here. And it's something that is not necessarily always done very well. I acknowledge not very many companies will look into health insurance for their people. Not many companies will say, in terms of tough times, let's say during COVID, when, you know, business has had to, you know, tighten up its belt, will say, no, we're committed to keeping on our workers or not docking their pay and that sort of thing. It's also something that, business also really has to take a keen look at. But I agree, it takes enlightened business, it takes long-term business. It's one of the things that actually we advocate for at the Global Compact, which is just making sure that businesses do what we call principled business. And we boil it down to a fundamental human right. It's a right of workers to be able to enjoy, rights and privileges that accrue to them, even as they are within your employment. So it's everything that I've spoken about, healthcare, access to job security and financial security, ability to do some form of long-term planning, ability to work under non-exploitative conditions, et cetera, and all that. That for me is the beginning of definitely of a social safety net that within my realm of work, we try to advocate businesses to take on. Now, when you expand it bigger, obviously, there's many businesses out there. Obviously, if they are working towards creating these safety nets, it will have an impact that could be a lot larger. But I do think, again, as I say, in terms of the basic provision of basic services, healthcare, education, at some point, it's not something that businesses can all take on, and you have to call on the state to be able to provide some of these at an affordable and accessible scale.
Gosh, there's so much coming into the chat now, and very, very, very interesting comments. I mean, in terms of inculcating a corporate culture that thinks more broadly about the challenges that our societies face. That this is perhaps the most prescient moment to appreciate that, and Naomi speaks into this same thing thinking, right? So she's saying she wants to add on to your comments. First of all, hi Naomi. So the pandemic has forced us to rethink our living situations and connection to the cities. We've seen a lot of us able to work from home and shift our thinking, and the same for employers. Maybe we can start thinking about how to improve areas outside the cities to make them more comfortable for people to invest in and live in permanently. And as urbanization is becoming a global phenomenon, it seems sometimes that we speak about it as a fait accompli, not thinking about these other parts of the country, of our towns and our countries that perhaps need a similar thinking and strategy in order to either stem this flow or make the entire country more livable. I think that's what Naomi is kind of speaking into. You've got about 7 minutes to the end of our time, Sandra. So I'll ask that this be the last comment that you make.
Sure. And hi, Naomi. How are you? Really good to see you again. I know Naomi very well. So great. And I agree with you, Naomi, now more than ever. I mean, work from home has taken on all sorts of dimensions. Home can be anywhere. We've always said, anyway, work is not a place, it's a space. So the idea that, we need to find alternatives, because I can see someone in the chat has also said, people get out of Nairobi to seek what Alessandra said that cities have destroyed, which is open spaces. If we are going to be confined to desks for these long periods of time, I think the idea is, where can we find comfort? And if our cities are not able to provide that because there's no open spaces, living spaces are growing much smaller over time, even access to basics is tricky. One would argue about congestion and connectivity and the impact that has. It certainly is time to start looking at alternative cities, alternative spaces where home is not necessarily that place that is close to the office. Home is, or the home office is somewhere where you can actually just work in peace and in comfort. And I know, especially for many, when work from home started, we just sat at the desk, and the desk was in a home, which for many was, decided because of proximity to work, for many. But the truth is, a proper work from home scenario is work from a place and a space that is comfortable for you. And that doesn't necessarily have to be in proximity.
Speaking of working from home and being in a new home, Sandra, we really thank you for joining us from your new home, and congratulations on your new assignment. We hope that you miss Kilimani sufficiently for you to travel back when COVID and various situations allow. Guys, you can just post the clap emoji on your profiles to show your appreciation for Sanda. Thank you so much for joining us, Sanda, and we hope that you can join us again for another discussion, as well as helping us ideate around what we need to do to be able to shape our city and our towns and our communities better. Asante, asante, asante sana.
Great, thank you all so very much. I must dash off for a bit of personal work that I need to do. It's Saturday, I have errands, the ones you do on Saturday mornings. So I've got to dash off and do some of that. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right, you too, enjoy the rest of the day, and Merry Christmas, Sanda.
Thank you so much, bye.
All right, so everybody who's on the call, this was supposed to be the portion that would be taken up by Alessandra, given that we'd have had a very engaging discussion with her as well, based on the TED Talk. But I want to ask you all a couple of questions, and if you will, kind of work with me on this. I know it's a bit of a surprise, but I wanted to do 3 questions because we don't have much time, and I'm thinking 3 questions would be good to be able to get about 2 or 3 responses from each. Wanjiro and Daniel, you can help me select who from within our call can answer those questions. And the first one I have is something that I was going to ask Alessandra, right? So, she spoke about some of the challenges that they have in Rio de Janeiro, and what she did in terms of forming Meu Rio, and building a community to be able to solve some of these challenges, and the community running ahead of government sometimes. We've seen lots of initiatives, similar initiatives here in Nairobi and across the country. But if you were to, have that platform that could speak to everybody, what would be the one mistake that you point out about how, we try and organize here in Nairobi that we could fix going forward, so that we can just organize and plan better and engage more and participate more? So Wanjiro, Daniel, you can choose whoever would, on the call would be able to answer this question, and let's go from there. Let's try and keep our answers short, guys.
Sorry, my camera is off because of bandwidth. But as we wait to see any hands in the chat box, can I call on Robin? I know Robin has some very good ideas around this.
Oh, wow, thank you. I was actually just about to ask John Allen if he would restate the question.
Sorry, Robin, what I was asking is, like, what are the most common mistakes that we make when organizing? And what do you think, as a suggestion, we could do to be able to organize better and participate better here in Kenya, and perhaps specifically even in Nairobi?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Kilimani Project Foundation, for hosting this opportunity for us to come together as a community and talk about our rights on this day. I think it's, and I'm speaking personally, as I think there's just a level of tiring out and not being, strategic and ready to go for the long haul on some of these issues. I think that we have to take the long view of what it takes for some of these processes. If we look at what it took to form a nation and all those, it didn't happen overnight. It took quite a lot of time, and it took, staying together for a clear purpose of where we're going. And I think that sometimes that gets lost, even for myself after, I've been with the foundation for 8 years, and I can even feel myself starting to say, this is not going to happen. This is just, let us just accept it. I'm just almost there. And I think, it's that window that all the intellect that's been gathered in all that years, all the, know-how could just go and sit on a shelf. And so I imagine so many other people have done a lot of things, and they just kind of want to just get tired. and just want to leave. And I think that's part of the process. Is Mugo talked about democracy and so forth. It's not set up to be easy. It's not set up to be welcoming, and it's just not. That's not its function, if you will. And so I think part of that's just one of the things off the top of my head is one that I think the being willing to have the long view and ready to see it through to completion.
Okay, great answer. Oops, sorry, just dropped something here. 10, Daniel, anybody else who you'd like to pick on to answer that question?
All right, thank you, John. Yeah. I'd like to call on Andrew Waitito. We'd want to hear his views on this particular issue. Andrew, karibu.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, just go ahead because I was a bit distracted here.
Okay, so Patrick says we can decentralize government offices in Nairobi CBD to reduce congestion. I don't know whether that was in reference to the question I asked or some of the comments that Sanda was making. But let me ask the second question now. All right, so.
Hi, John.
Yes. Oh, Janvan,
yeah,
sorry.
Janvan.
Yeah, go ahead, Janvan.
Yeah, I addressed my hand up. Yeah, thanks a lot. I think answering to that question, first of all, thank you all for organizing this. This is my first time joining this dinner. And in my catch up with Alan Namo, I told him that I think I'm the youngest in this meeting. So I think my perspective I'll give from a youth perspective. And first of all, I live along Gong Road next to Rescos. And but I'm happy to be part of the Kilimani family. So one of the things that I think we need to do differently as Nairobi is about trying to involve the people. I think that's what the basis of this question was. And from my end, I think one of the things that we mostly forget, I think, is about being appealing, coming up with appealing solutions in our society. For instance, I'm a young man, and you know, some of the solutions that we want to put across may not be appealing to me. So coming up with such solutions that are appealing to a certain group or a certain society. For instance, we want to change, want to bring change to, let's say, to Kilimani. So we just look at what is appealing to Kilimani, because what's appealing to us may not appeal to others. And then in Sandra's presentation, she talked about policy trickling down. Also, I think at some point we need to also do bottom up, whereby policy starts from down going up. This will also involve the public in formulating these policies. So once they are involved, they'll feel that these policies that they want, that are bringing about change to their setting, they are appealing to them. So I think my point is that we come up with the policies that are appealing, and then we try doing it bottom up as opposed to top down. And then also doing regular reviews and checking what went wrong back, not that when we finish a project, that's it. So I think those are some of the things that we forget, and they hinder our goal of creating change in the society. Thank you, Alan.
All right, thanks a lot. Robin, you have something to comment?
Yeah, no, that's great, Jonathan. Thank you very much for, you know, I think bringing a youth voice in here. And I think he raised a very good point, and this is something that, you know, what do you say, making propositions or proposals that are appealing to others, if you will, different groups. And I wanted to just kind of, this is, you know, as a community foundation, and Javan, even the whole of Nairobi or any other places that we find ourselves in, whose job is to make it appealing? That was the question I wanted to arise. Are we waiting for someone to make it appealing, or do we get into these spaces and then, you know, have it speak to our constituency? How do we, you know, how do we get into these spaces and then, you know, drive the narrative? Or do we say they aren't speaking to me? And this is not for you, Janvin, personally. I think this is for people, you know, as you talked about, John Allen, what are the challenges? I think this is one of them. You know, as we want to wait for someone to speak to me, how do you get in and run into the fire and then do the language and the work and the speaking?
Mm-hmm. Okay, anybody who wants to respond to Robin, including Janvan, you can. I know I said that I wanted to ask a couple more questions here, but given that you know the hour is getting a little late, and I'm sure people haven't been eating their dinner as religiously as they should have during this time, given how engaging everything was. Let's have that response to Robin's question / rebuttal, and then we'll close this portion and move on with the program. Janvan, you want to take a stab at that?
Let me try. Thanks, Robin, for the question. I think I'll say that, you know, we are living in we are living in a society whereby everything is selfish. And in this society, we also have a social contract. So, you know, we can't, now everyone needs to be, to be arms, to be selfish and try to grab something, not to wait until they are given bread to eat. You should try to get your bread. So that's why that's what I think we should not, as a youth, I should not wait to be brought to something that is appealing. I should be ready, to take up to do that. And this comes also to the social contract, whereby in every year we are giving a chance to go and vote. So I think as a society, as Nairobians, we need to come up, we need to be smart and elect leaders, because now leaders are the ones who are making these, they're the ones who are driving most of these initiatives. So I think just having, being brilliant enough and voting smartly, because I think that will create some change. But ideally, I think one of the things that also need to be done in terms of creating change, in the society, one of the things that needs to be done is cultivating this culture from an early age. For instance, children, they are golden, but they are brought to this earth that, it's so selfish. But, if we are telling them from an early age that you need to fight for yourself without minding others, may be a bit difficult in achieving something that we need. So just cultivating it from an early age, so that this is something that we learn as we grow up, and then trying to share, not just, not just in terms of resources wise, but also in terms of value, and then trying to change the culture of that we need help to be helped. We need to be, I think we need help from ourselves. We need to help ourselves. It needs to come from us to achieve the change that we desire.
All right. Yeah, so we, God helps those who help themselves. We are the ones we have been waiting for. All very good and inspiring and comments to make about the current predicament that we have. I'll leave it there, guys, because we've got lots more. I hope you've got dessert somewhere at the edge of your screens, because as Andrew, I can see you're having a very sumptuous dinner. I hope there's dessert after. But I'm going to wind up there, guys. Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this chat. Unfortunately, I have to dash and pick up the kids from a birthday party. I'll try and see if I can keep on the chat as I drive like Margaret. But if not, it's been an absolute pleasure hosting this discussion, and I hope that we can do lots and lots more of these dinners. All right, guys, kwaherini. Enjoy your evening, and I hope to see what the results of the awards are.
Thank you very much, John Allen. Just if I can acknowledge you for really being a stand for this country, even when it's not clear whether the whole country appreciates your work. There are many of us who follow you with great fondness and real sense of relatedness to your work, and it's great to have you in the community. It also makes us proud, I think. You can continue on the Zoom, and if you would like, you can also go to the Facebook link if that's easier to watch it from your car. For the rest of us, we'll continue to begin to look at some of the people that have made a real difference in the community in the course of this year. So we're going to take a minute or two before we close, just to acknowledge those people that we have worked with, and some of them will be very familiar to you. So I'm going to invite, oh, it's a little bit pixelated, I can see. Can you enlarge it a little bit, Daniel? We will, that's much better. And then go down to the bottom. I'd like to start from the bottom right. So I would like, so we have a number of people that we would like to acknowledge in the community. And if you don't know these folks, this is a great opportunity for you to start connecting with some of the resources and the fine men and women that are in this community. Now, I'll start with the late engineer Jan Tai, who we are giving a posthumous award. And this for several reasons. I mean, we've listed here his vision towards developing Kilimani and the Greater Nairobi as prosperous neighborhoods. But Jan was a driving force in the work that we did around trying to develop from the community upwards a physical plan for Kilimani. He was very much instrumental in the plan development working group. In fact, he co-chaired that working group with Robin T. Emerson. And when he passed away, we lost a great Kenyan, actually, and a great Kilimanian. So we just remember him in this moment, and we will give his widow and the children the small gift that we had essentially put aside for him. So that's Chan Tahi. I'd like to turn to Margaret Sunguti Gadhambi, who is on the call. I don't know if, Margaret, you can switch on your camera. Again, she has been on earlier, and I just want to acknowledge her as another Kili Shuja. Now, Margaret, we met during the heat of COVID. If you remember back in early March, it wasn't Dandora or Mathare or Kibera, which was the epicenter of COVID-19. It was actually Kilimani. And many of us began to worry about inviting our neighbors, our relatives to come visit us, because we thought that there was so much COVID in the air that people would catch it as they drove into Kilimani. Margaret is one of those people that went out daily, both during the day and in the evening, to really protect people. She's a public health worker. She works for the County of Nairobi, and she was a real gem of a leader during this period. And I say that without any hesitation, Margaret, for your support and your reassurance during the COVID-19. You stood up at a time when PPEs were not available all the time. You stood up and you advised the foundation. We came out and walked with you in Dagoretti North as you were doing the mass testing, and we just have great admiration for your leadership. I don't know if you just want to say a short word or two, Margaret, so we can hear your voice. I just put your...
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I really appreciate the good work that we have done with the Kilimani Foundation. And I'm very, 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 very appreciative. And also I'm happy to be part of you. And I continue to be part of you as we engage the community and as we do service delivery to the wananchi. Thank you very much, Kilimanians, for making sure that when the COVID started, that you gave us enough masks, and also you supported us with PPEs, and also your prayers to the health workers has really made us to usually have energy to continue working for Kenyans. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Margaret. Much respect, Margaret, for the work that you do, not just for the Kilimanians, but for the whole of Dagoretti North. I'm going to turn to Zubin Parikh, who I believe is online, and invite Zubin to switch on his camera so that we can see his face. And Zubin, we can see you now. Thank you very much. So Zubin, we are acknowledging you as a community, first of all, for being part of our community, but really for the philanthropic support that you have given our community throughout, I think several months, particularly over this period of COVID-19, but you're not new to the foundation as you have given support to us. And just to make this very clear, as we were grappling with how to support the domestic workers along Moringa Road and Demi Road. And we were now thinking about a social enterprise that they could set up with us to be able to produce soap and sanitizers and other products for the market, and therefore reduce their dependency on work that was just not available. You came forward and gave us a truck to help us to move the products from one side to the other. You've been an active, support to the environmental team, and I believe you've also been active in the planned development team as well. So, on behalf of the Kilimani community, thank you, Zubin. This comes really from a sense of respect for you, and I hope that you continue to be part of the foundation and the community more broadly. So, thank you, Zubin. I don't know if you want to say a couple of words. I know you've had a long day, huh?
Yeah, sorry, I just drove back from the Kenya coast, so a little bit tired. Forgive me. I didn't have any idea you're going to acknowledge me, but I'm very grateful. I feel actually maybe I could do more. So hopefully I can contribute more to the Kilimani Project Foundation, not just in the form of philanthropy, but in other forms as well. But definitely I will be there for this great foundation as a Kilimanian. Thank you.
Thank you much, Zubin. And I'm glad you got back safely before curfew. We would have been worried, but we would have gone to the police station to protect you. So let me turn to let me turn to Daniel Nyakora. Daniel Nyakora has been the hidden technician on many of our Kililogs over 2020. I think we did 5 or 6 Kililogs. And he really has anchored the communications team with support for the technology. And in fact, as I speak now, I hope his camera is on. As I speak now, it is Daniel who is really helping us to do this virtually. So Daniel, just again, our thanks, our respect for the leadership you bring to helping the Kilimani brand come alive with the community, to really make this the kind of community that other communities envy, not because we encourage envy, but because we encourage them also to lift their game. And I can just maybe announce now that as a result of the voluntary contributions that you have made over the last few years, in our last board meeting, we actually proposed, and you have accepted, to join the board of the Kilimani Project Foundation. So I think, let me just make that announcement live on Facebook at 14 minutes past 9. So this is a news flash. Daniel Nyakora joins the board. Welcome and thank you very much. Daniel, I don't know if you have a few words.
I don't have many words to say, really. It's been a pleasure to work with an excellent team. And I always think that I did the least amongst the team, and I could do more, just like Zubin said. And I really, truly appreciate, with all the humility, to join the board. I know this is a call. It's really a call to service, and a call to service is, it needs a lot of guidance from God. And I look to the mentorship. I think I'll be the youngest in the board, so I look to the mentorship of the board leadership and the others to guide me and to show me how to serve better and to lead through service. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate this.
Super. And let me turn now to Jerry Ndehi. I think it's our 4th Shujaa. The others will probably go a little bit faster. as a number of them had said that they were not able to attend, partly because they're out of the city with limited broadband. I don't know if they're in Brazil, but there are probably in places that have the same internet capacity or KPLC as Brazil. But Njeri Dehi has been really an active part of the Plan Development Working Group. She's on the call. And the other thing that I would just like to acknowledge is that, you know, she's an active voice in the different WhatsApp groups that we have. So she is somebody that, you know, is, I guess, looking beyond perhaps the Kalbro in her community, in her compound, and the Wi-Fi hotspot that she probably has. I don't know if she has Zuku or fiber, but she's really looking for connections broader than how Wi-Fi currently goes. So Jerry, congratulations. Thank you very much. Please greet the people.
Thank you, Ronko, and thank you everybody for this appreciation. It did come as a bit of a surprise, but I appreciate it anyway. It's been wonderful working with the team, and just to echo what Robin said earlier, some of these things don't happen overnight, and she's also encouraged me to be patient and to stick it out. So I keep wishing the foundation the very best, and I'm sure with excellent teamwork, we'll get where we need to go. Thank you, Rongo.
Thanks, Jerry, and keep rising, keep serving, and we'll see whether we actually can produce a model with the Baraza that transforms the way that the built environment is managed across Nairobi, if not across the 47 counties. The other Shujaz are not with us, I believe, but I'm just going to run through because I said I would do this. I think Cecil Miller might be joining us on Facebook, but he also apologized that he wasn't able to. Now, Cecil is kind of a special guy in some ways. He you know, has a history with Kilimani. He has property in Kilimani, and for 2 years, his legal firm anchored for free. So pro bono legal services were provided by his company to help us to close down the noisy 5 clubs that terrorized the community. I mean, I won't be more dramatic than that, but Cecil essentially gave us those resources. He followed up personally. He made sure that the lawyers that were assigned to the case did not take bribes, were not swayed from their course by the clubs. And we got a result that had those clubs closed down. And secondly, when they appealed, he took that fight to the Court of Appeal, and they won it again. So, you know, he's really very much part of the success of 2020. I'll move now to Sadiq Mali, Maki, who is a proprietor, and we have no problem talking about people's connections. Sadiq runs Absolute Security Services. He also runs voluntarily for the Kilimani community a very special security group that gives information on security matters with the Kilimani community. He's our first point of contact with the Kilimani police station, and is generally a very good resource in terms of safety for Kilimanians. So I just acknowledge him also for being available during this time of COVID. And with that, I'll move down one to Doris Mugambi. So SP Doris Mugambi is a police officer. She was responsible for the management of curfew in Kilimani for the best part of this year. Now, Doris, you know, managed this process in a manner in which we did not have any headlines that people had been brutalized. There was no reckless shooting either in Kilimani, Kileleshwa, Upper Hill, or Kibra during this period. She was an empathetic ear. There are a number of times I reached out to her to alert her that there was either crime or insecurity that had been reported on our WhatsApp groups, and she took action. And really her service is what you would expect of an officer of the law. She brings grace and leadership to the uniform, and for that reason, we acknowledge her also during this period. I'll go down to, while we're still on the law enforcement and safety section, our last Kili Shuja for the year, and that is Chief David Omido. Chief David has been really a responsive and resourceful partner with the government. He came into the community just around the time of COVID. He anchored our conversations with the Kilimani police station. He was a source of support and protection for the domestic women at a time that they were beginning to be criminalized and they were being arrested, essentially for being on the streets looking for work in large numbers. And David understood what we were about. He gave us audience. He introduced us to the sub-county team and proceeded to advise us over this period to make sure that all the things we wanted to do with the domestic workers and the Moringa Women's Association was supported by government and understood by government. And I just acknowledge him for the work that he continues to do for the foundation, and in particular, the work that he does for the community. So with these few remarks, please let me ask you just to unmute your microphones, and let's just hear a round of applause for the Kile Shujaas for 2020. So each of them have a small special gift. Each of them have a small special gift that we were delivering to them, and encourage them to stay with us. And I think, you know, Zubin and Daniel, you know, I probably give, I don't know, it's probably about 3 or 4 days a month to the foundation, and I do it voluntarily. I've done it for several years now. I always feel I can do more. So I encourage you, you know, to just keep looking for ways to connect with us, and you know, let's continue to serve the community so that we can, like the people of Buru sometimes say, hey, I came from Buru, even as we came from Kili. So that's the framework that I think we want to move forward with. So let me turn to, we're coming to closing remarks, because I know the evening has been a good evening, but we may want to turn to other matters. I'm going to invite Martha Wamoyo, the coordinator at the for our public events and communications, to just do a quick vote of thanks, and then the executive director will close us off. Martha.
Irungu, and thank you everyone who came on to this call tonight. We're really grateful for your support, and I really hope that you took something out that will help you activate your role in the community to shape and define our Nairobi and our Kilimani that we want to see. I want to sincerely thank, especially thank John Alanamu, our moderator tonight. Thank you for steering the conversation and driving this conversation ahead. We're really grateful for you for heeding to our call. I want to also thank Sanda for taking the time to join us tonight. We sincerely thank you for taking the time to be with us. It was such a short notice, but you made the time to come and be with the community. And I really hope that your contribution has been, you know, people have taken away things that have inspired them to continue acting on behalf of the community. Even though Alessandra could not join us, we're grateful to her for heeding to the call and, you know, agreeing to be our guest speaker at this event tonight. I also want to sincerely thank the Kilimani Project Foundation board members, led by Rungu Houghton. Thank you, our board members, for all the hours that you put in to the work of the foundation. The foundation really, you are really the foundation for the foundation. So I'm really grateful to all our board members, Irungu Houghton, Mugawa Karanja, Emma Miloyo, Emily Mutindi, Becky Karanja, Pauline Durango, Cara Rucalo, and some of them could not join us tonight, but their contribution is really appreciated, and thank you for always steering forward the work of the foundation. I also want to sincerely thank members of the different committees within the Kilimani Project Foundation. Thank you all, Kina Njerindehi, Kina Robin Emerson, Naomi Konditi. Thank you all. You make us shine, and it is your volunteer work that helps the foundation keep going forward. Lastly, I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. I hope that you're inspired to act on behalf of the Kilimani we want, the Nairobi we want, and we hope to see more of this conversation happening within us, because this is the only way that and the neighborhoods and the communities that we want to see among us ourselves. Thank you, everyone, and have a very lovely evening.
Thank you too.
Wanjiro, you may be muted, huh?
Oh, sorry about that.
There had to be one of them today.
It happened to be me. I'm sorry about that. But I hope you can hear me now. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. I know we've run over our program, but thank you for staying through. We hope this evening was everything that you imagined it to be. We thank you for taking your time, for coming through in terms of, buying the tickets. I hope you all ordered meals from our partners in Kilimani. And I'll take this moment to just take a second to honor our partners who helped make this night possible. I want to say a great big thank you to Kesh Restaurant, to Melvin's Mash, who are able to give us gift hampers for our Kili Shujas. A big thank you to 4 Points by Sheraton, who are able to provide some of the meals for our guests. Pat Streets were able to provide the gift packages that we distributed to our Kili Shujas. We also had meals delivered to our guests from Kienyeji store. We also partnered with Candid Conversations for business women in Kenya. The little packages we're giving our Kili Shujas. It was very well thought out and very, very beautiful. Thank you so much to this partner. We also want to thank Mama Rocks for their amazing burgers, and Craft Meaning that were able to supply us with the masks, which we shall be distributing to the trivia winners as well. So thank you all very much for joining. And this is just a final call to you all and I hope, as Martha said, you've been inspired to do something in your own space to build the city, to build your community in whatever way you can. Please take a step, take one step to do that, and you will see a difference. If you want to join the Kilimani Project Foundation, we shall leave the details in the chat. Please come and join us, because together we will make Kilimani the place to be. It will be a model community within Nairobi and also for those not within Nairobi. So asanteni sana. Please feel free to stay longer. We shall be playing a bit of, rumba, but karibuni sana. If you want, you feel free to leave after this. But thank you very much for making this an amazing night. Asanteni sana. Happy holidays and prosperous new year. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret.
Bye, Margaret. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks for coming.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Enjoy your holidays.
nikiwa nikitembea mara kwa mara ukumbuka mapenzi yetu vipi madam. Mapenzi sio kitu kipya duniani, kilianza na Adamu na Hawa. Maila nimesafiri, uko umebakia, chunga mapenzi yetu, kwa simu tutaongea. Mapenzi ya simu sitaweza, kama unipendi uniambie, mimi bado ni mrembo sitangoja, nikapenda naolewa amie. Mapenzi haichagui kabila, siku hizi mzuri